keynote. So I would invite my fellow API experts on the stage. If I can get Claire and Matthias here, how is everything going? Where are you, Claire? You are not in Helsinki. Where are you?
I'm in the UK, and it's a very frosty morning here, actually. So we're almost not quite finished weather, but still feeling like the signs of spring are there, but they haven't quite realized yet.
Yeah. But if it's not 10 centimeters of snow, it's not the real winter, So, no, but really nice to have you here. What about you, Matthias?
I'm located in Switzerland, and right now we have a really interesting weather as well. So we don't have white stuff coming from above. We have now red stuff. There's Sahara sand that's being blown, and that comes down now. So I was looking at the terrace this morning. There's a little bit of dust, red dust. It's kind of spooky, but that's apparently what's happening right now.
Yeah, we sometimes get that in Finland too. So, but it is really weird. But hey, you have your own pyramids, the Alps there. So luckily, it's not raining pyramids from Sahara. So that's fine. Okay. So are we kind of mentally in the right space to start with the keynote? Everything good?
I would say so, Marjukka. Yeah. So we three have thought up about creating business value with APIs. And creating business value with APIs is something that lots of people think about, but sometimes it can feel like solving a really tough puzzle, like solving Rubik's Cube. And today in this talk, we're not going to give you the algorithm for solving Rubik's Cube or for solving really the puzzle of creating business value with API products, but we're going to show you a couple of patterns that we have seen out in the field that seem to work, and that's what we're going to talk about today. I think it's really like a puzzle because there are so many dimensions. It's a multi-dimensional problem. You need to have a look from different perspectives on the problem to be able to solve it. And when I think about the companies who are really good at producing business value with API products, then I see that they're taking this multidimensional approach and multidisciplinary approach, where they have people who look at it from the technical perspective of creating really great APIs, designing the APIs in a good way. You have people who understand the customers, people who understand the product itself, the product underneath the API that you want to offer via API. You have people that look at it from a business perspective. So they look at costs, they look at the overall overarching business model, and they look at the revenue that's coming in. And then also you have people who are organizational builders that look at how do you structure your organization so you can build really great API products and be successful with it. And I think because of this multidisciplinary approach, we also have chosen for this topic to not only have one presenter, but to have three presenters who each have a different perspective on the topic to kind of cover it from all these different angles. So I would like to maybe ask Marjukka first to give your perspective on the topic of business models for API products.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, we really thought about this topic and all these foundations, and it was funny when we were preparing for this talk. We had like a lot of no, it's not like this, and yes, it's like this, but have you thought about this moments? And then we were even kind of, before I was allowed to put the business model canvas here in the slide, we were having this whole talk about, is this the way that other people are thinking about this, and is business model canvas something that people even know about, and who knows about it? So I would really love Matt, who promised to ask some stupid questions in the chat just now, and some others to comment on the use of business model with APIs. But so is there features, is there products? What's the whole take on this? So API can actually be in a lot of different places in your business model. So it can be the actual product, it can be the thing that alone brings value to your customers, but it can also be a channel to your value proposition, to your product, service, whatever resource you're offering. And it can even, be just a technical thing that exposes your resources for your internal use and for some other product or service to actually be the one to create value with, which then brings us to the questions of revenues and other benefits, and then also the costs. Like, what are you actually building and to whom? And if we kind of go to the next slide with this, that is the key question. When we were writing the blogs about this, which you can find, we'll post some links to the chat later, but we were really thinking about this, like examples of what are we selling, how are APIs impacting what we are selling. So are we just selling the APIs? Are we selling APIs as an add-on to traditional products? Are we selling digital apps and the kind of API is just something that makes that possible? Or are we actually more capable of selling ready-made integrations instead of APIs? Is that what our customer segments and partners are actually expecting us to do? So a lot of questions are arising, and I don't know, what do you think, Claire, for example, about this?
Well, I mean, the thing that jumps to me immediately is who are the people that you need to have in a room to be able to come up with these kinds of conclusions. So it's a who needs to be able to navigate through this.
Yeah, I think we've been doing some joint consulting too, and I think that's always the question: who do we actually need in the room, in the Zoom or whatever we are doing it? And I think when I was developing the API cycles method, that was one of the key questions, and that's why we actually used the value proposition canvas and business model canvas as part of the method, because those were the things that we found that the more business people or service designers, product managers were able to really easily get their heads around. And with a little bit of explanation, they were also making some sense to the more technical people who and developers who were participating. And so I think that ultimately, because this is a strategic choice, you need to figure out what are you selling and who is your target audience. Is it going to be developers or platform owners, partners actually that are then servicing your end customers? Then that's going to be the key question, and that comes down to this API consumer segments. That is such a key thing, and that ultimately answers some of the questions of who you should be having in the room. You might even have to have the actual API to be API consumers involved in the process, like somebody was asking yesterday during some of the talks, that should and could they be part of this? So I know, Matthias, you have been thinking about this a lot. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think well, sometimes when you talk about business models, there is a bit of a confusion between the terms business model and revenue model, right? Maybe you can give us your perspective on what the difference is and why that matters.
Yeah, an excellent question, because actually there's that list that was originally published in Programmable Web, I think, that is talking about API business models, but actually it's listing API revenue models. And what's the difference is that a whole business model is like all the bits and pieces that make up how and what and to whom the organization, the company is offering its services, and like how it's sold, to whom, how it's produced, all the bits and pieces. But a revenue model is just the box in the corner. It's like, how do we make money out of this? And of course, it's not a small thing, but it is just that thing. And it's not even sometimes that you want to make direct revenue out of the APIs. There's a question coming to you, Matt, about that. But before that, I would like to say that when we were writing the book API Economy 101, we actually made this study of first, what are the resources that APIs can be used to expose in an organization, and then at least 7 ways that APIs can be fitted in your business model, and some of them had something to do with actually taking money from the use of the API. So what do you think, like, how do we actually make money or get other benefits from APIs, Matt? What is going on there?
Yeah, thank you. So I get this question a lot. So how can we make money with our APIs? That's a question that comes up sooner or later in an API initiative, it seems. We put in so much effort and time into creating APIs. We want to get some revenue. We want to get some money for it. How do we actually go and do this? And I think what's in the back of the mind of a lot of people when they think about making money with APIs, it's like these examples of Twilio and Stripe, where they actually take some money for each and every API call. We call this pattern the direct API monetization pattern. But actually, when you look at it, it's only a small part of the API space that makes money using direct API monetization. So what does the other part do? The other part uses a pattern called indirect API monetization. And this indirect API monetization, this seems to be like a catch-all phrase. You know, everything that's not direct API monetization is indirect API monetization. But there is a little bit more to it. And we need to understand what indirect API monetization is, especially if we want to use this pattern constructively going forward, when we want to construct APIs that we can monetize indirectly. So how do we actually do this? So we take now this pattern apart a little bit. First, when you want to start with indirect API monetization, you take a product that you already have. You're a bank, you have a bank account. That's the product you sell. You're an insurance, you sell insurance policies. You're a car manufacturer, you sell cars. Those are your products, you monetize them. No API so far. You put an API next to it, and this API is actually given out to developers for free, not to your customers, but to a new type of customer, so to say, to developers, and they get it for free. So why would you do that, right? We talk about monetization. Why do you give things away for free? Well, the answer is in the relation between this API, I represent it here as a building block because you can integrate it into another digital experience. The relation between the API and the product is what's really important for indirect API monetization. And this relation needs to be in such a way that the API supports the sale of the original underlying product, right? And that can be in terms of making the product more attractive. If you have an API, something is possible that makes the product more attractive and more competitive, or it helps directly in the sales process. And so what does this actually mean and how can we construct it? So the relation between the API and the product is super important, and that's why we're going to look into several patterns that actually work for making this relation happen. So I'm listing 4 different patterns here for indirect API monetization, and the idea is that you go forward and think about how can those patterns apply to my products in my business, and which APIs could I build to realize those patterns. So the first one is API is a feature. Yeah, products have features. Take Spotify, it has a feature of listening to music, searching music, and discovering music with AI. Another feature is an API, and this API helps Spotify kind of to link it up in a digital environment to other apps that people, customers of Spotify already use. So it creates some kind of a lock-in, or it creates, it prevents churn. So people don't go away because it's part of their digital environment that they use day in and day out. An API can also be a sales funnel or a distribution funnel that helps you create leads for your underlying product. If you have an insurance business, embedded insurance is such a lead creator. you can kind of embed the process of selling the insurance into another experience. And that way it is indirectly monetized, this API. The API can also be a data feed. You think about social media, where a lot of the content is actually produced by consumers and delivered via an API into kind of into the platform. And then you can have APIs as internal products, but it's not all internal APIs that can be indirectly monetized. These internal APIs need to create some value for the overall product. So if you have Netflix as an overall product, for example, then the internal API that Netflix offers gives this omni-channel, multi-channel experience where you stop watching the movie on your TV and then you switch over to your mobile phone and the movie starts at exactly the same point in time where you've stopped watching it before. So these are some of these patterns, and I went over those quite quickly. You can find more examples or more in-depth information on these patterns on the link on the QR code that's above on the screen.
I also shared the link to the blogs in the chat if anybody's interested to know more. So a question about this, what do you see as being the most common indirect business models?
So the most common API out of those is probably the internal API, right? Every API initiative has an internal API, but not all of these internal APIs are really indirectly monetized, right? So some are more supporting APIs. They're not really helping to make the product really more attractive. But what I think is coming more and more is this API as a feature, which helps you build ecosystem. I think this is the type of indirectly monetized API that's on the rise, where more and more, I mean, SaaS applications in any way, but even other businesses are thinking about how can I become a part of an ecosystem? How can I build an ecosystem around my product? And I think this is the kind of API indirectly monetized that's on the rise, and that if you haven't thought about how you can use this pattern, you should think about it.
Matt, are you seeing these patterns playing out in things like the way people present catalogs and marketplaces for APIs? What are some of your observations?
I think that's a really good idea, because you want to be kind of transparent when you describe your APIs on your portal about why you're bringing out this API, right? The API, if the API would be monetized, it would be clear. There's a price. This company brings out the API because it has a price and they want to make money like this. But if it doesn't have a price, you need to build trust and explain why you bring it out. And there's also business personas who will ask this question, basically. So describing why you have this API out there, creating this transparency and trust, I think is super valuable. But these patterns here are primarily thought up not for describing your APIs, but they're primarily for helping you ideate or construct APIs that have these monetization capabilities, those indirect API monetization capabilities. So think about your product and your business and try which one of those patterns would apply. But of course, it's not only having good ideas about APIs that's relevant, you also need to have an organization in place that allows you to explore those new API products. So maybe Claire, you can tell us a little bit about organizational structures that support companies in bringing out those API products.
Absolutely. It's certainly key that many organizations underestimate the impact on thinking from an API product perspective on the way they do things today. There's a tendency to assume that just because your team maybe is deeply immersed in, it could be at conferences like this, for example, really getting to understand the opportunity for an API product, that may be really difficult for other people to understand and get straight away. they may not think that understanding how to manage the change through it is actually part of a disciplined process that you can use to think about how to get traction internally. And there's also a tendency to think that the API product thinking and mindset, coming up with all these great ideas, thinking about how to get value from them, can fit in today's structure and organization. So the way that we think about it is you need to find three things. Just go to the next slide. Thank you. Understanding the stakeholder landscape means you need to find a home, the right place for the API product leadership to live and sit in. Need to find the right investment commercial model to get behind and support the investments that you're going to be making in API products. And you need to find the right places in the organization to both start and communicate the value and show results, and to keep going from. And a model that we've been using to help organizations answer these questions is to think about instead of an org structure as it lives today, but to think about the three different main roles that people have in getting behind and executing and finding great API product ideas. So in terms of homes for where the API product leadership can live, can either live in a group that we would describe as the sponsors, so the people who have custodianship of the strategy for the organization, the people who have deep understanding of existing customers and business models, business today. They have the corporate history, if you like. They understand the culture, and they've got the big picture vision of where the organization wants to go. That can be a great place to lead your API product thinking. You may better think that actually you'll get faster traction by using your transformer community. So these are the people who are out exploring new ways of doing business, into new working on new partnerships. So sometimes they've got labels like innovation or digital. The sponsor labels, by the way, have been more like commercial or sales. You may also, some organizations choose to start their API product thinking from the technology community, the people who can think of as the navigators with the roadmaps for where we're, the future of tech to support the organization through its change. Of course, the technologists naturally understand the customers as developers, and so their skill set in being able to articulate API opportunities for end consumers is also a potential place where that home can live. That leads on to the question about where investment can best support the organization for API products. So justifying an API product play into a new business model can often be challenged when tried to measure it up against other types of project-based investment or product funding in the future. You can actually think about it in terms of whether that API product leadership comes from the sponsors side of things. So if you're looking for API value from your business commercial space, you would anchor it there. If you think your API product investment is going to come more from part of your transformation agenda, you might fund it through part of your transformation change, or if it's more of a technology-led thing, from that technology standpoint. And each of those questions that you're looking to answer will also help think about where you are best going to get started. Typically, you want your API product to almost be led from the center of those three areas of expertise. You need people on the team with all three capabilities, but naturally, it's often more the case that they'll start in one of them and start moving towards the center. What are you seeing, Marjukka, in the organizations that you're working with?
Yeah, I was thinking about that, and actually, I think this is exactly the thing, that it starts somewhere, and depending on where it starts, the roadmap of getting to the end is a bit different. So what we see often is that there's a very technical focus, like there have been digital platforms built. And then suddenly, oh my God, we have a lot of APIs. What do we do now? And then maybe like we had this one discussion with a customer that recently, that they had built a lot of good APIs and digital experience to their customers and partners, but now the customers and partners suddenly say, we want APIs, we want data, and we want direct access to our systems. And that's a whole nother ball game. It's like, okay, now how do we convince the business that yes, we can do this, and what journeys do we need to plan now? But there's a good question about ecosystems actually in the chat there, and we can talk about that later. But I think that this is also a good question, that if we are thinking about the internal decisions of one company, this may look one thing, but when we think about the whole ecosystem of players, then it may look another thing. so even if the internal will is to do certain kind of APIs and fight the fights inside the company, then the partners may have totally different ideas. So what do you think, Matthias? Do you see this a lot?
Well, I was wondering, when you talk about the middle part here, the buy-in, how to structure investment governance, that API programs and innovative ideas really have a chance. Because when there's a IT budget to be spent for a year, and it has to be split up amongst different products or projects, then there's typically, in an organization, there's the cash cow, right? There's one API, or not even API, maybe a product, a digital product that brings in most of the revenue. And it's very easy to say, okay, we spent the biggest part of our money on that, tweaking it a little bit so we get even more revenue. And then the question is, how does a new initiative, a new innovative idea, even get a chance, like an API program, get a chance to get some funding, when the outlook for, the immediate outlook for creating any kind of return in the short term? In the long term it does, but in the short term it's not. It's a bit vague because there's no experience yet. So what's your experience? How do companies typically resolve that kind of dilemma?
Yeah, so I think it goes back to firstly asking where the center of gravity is for that API innovation opportunity. So if it's in the what I call a sponsor bottle, so if it's seen very much, if it's got strong strategic support and it's being seen as a commercial profit-making center, if you like, from the outset, then it's you need to almost set up an organizational unit within the organization. And we've seen that in companies, I think, that really do get this opportunity quickly. They're actually putting in, setting up a small team, giving them free rein, if you like, and they're giving them some time. So this is not a quarterly return that they're looking for. They're seeing this as maybe a 2+3+ year investment, and they're staffing it with someone who's got the trust of the leadership in terms of their commercial savviness, and they're putting that in as a unit, and they're making and giving them the license to go out and explore, to go out and make this business. There are other organizations that have put a huge amount of investment and are still in their transformation agenda, in their programs, and so they maybe will carve out part of that, or they'll look for their transformation, which could be reimagining an existing customer journey, wide-scale digitization, so maybe some significant systems transformation overhaul. That's in that transformer space, and so they'll be carving out part of that initiative to get going. And the third one can be, if the center of gravity for the API thinking is in the technology function, then within the IT budget, there's an opportunity perhaps to start from really getting value out of internal IT products and putting in really strong platforms and enablement capabilities behind that, and then sort of moving that out to the other two. Any one of the three starter points and the model needs tight collaboration with the other two, and that's where we see at the moment, for many organizations at the moment, they've got traction in one or maybe two of these areas, and they're challenged with the questions of how do I bring the other two or the third one in so that we can all move together on this. So they get to a kind of certain point and then need a bigger change.
I have a quick comment on that before we continue, because there's actually a good question in the chat about business model, like how do you pick a business model? And continuing first one from what you guys were saying and kind of tying in with the business model canvas, I remember a funny conversation, which was not funny. I mean, it was a very typical conversation, but in the same room physically. At that time, we used to go into same rooms. So we had a discussion with within a company that there was the IT and there was the business unit and customer kind of relationship owners, and the business guys were out of from the room for a moment, and we were talking about which APIs to build to which audiences. And the IT managers were saying, well, there's no chance, we just have to cater everybody, like, you know, all the big and small and everybody, we just have to give them the APIs. And actually it's not enough that we give them APIs, we have to give them the integrations too, because we already know that they are not all capable of doing those integrations to their systems with our APIs alone. And then when the business people came back from another meeting, they were like, no, definitely not. We are not an integration company. Our business is doing totally different things. And we will basically just handle the big money customers and give them all the integrations that they need. But the others we can handle with partners. So we'll just offer the APIs, the others can handle partners. And I think that's the important thing, to have that kind of strategy of like, what are we actually trying to achieve? But also like the business model canvas might not be everybody's favorite, but it's one of the tools, like these circles that you are using very successfully, I know in a lot of cases, that it just makes people think from a different perspective and have a meaningful conversation. And I think that it's just a way that, you know, you have to look at all the aspects of the Rubik's Cube to get to the right decision of the business model. Do you agree, Matthias, on that?
Yeah, I agree. So I think the business model canvas, or also the value proposition canvas, gives you some structure so you can go explore and be creative. And it gives you some guardrails, but it also, you know, allows you to bring some ideas out there that maybe are not realizable at first. So it gives you this creative space, this room for being innovative, and it also gives you a language, you know. So it's a communication tool. So it's not blah blah blah. But it is about a certain topic. You can say, okay, now we're going to talk about what is our value proposition. You know, it gives you this way of directing the conversation in a certain direction by giving you this vocabulary and this terminology. So I think from that perspective, it's very valuable to have such tools as business model canvas and value proposition canvas.
But Claire, we all were actually talking about the ownership of, like, okay, who needs to be in the room, and the ownership of APIs and API products. And you had this one example related to carbon emissions, I think. So what do you think? Who needs to be the owner?
So perhaps just for the group, talk about what that example was. So took an example of an industrial manufacturing business that's looking to with large global organization with lots of different customer-facing segments around the uses of their machinery in large physical devices, buildings, vehicles, large-scale mining use, etc. They have come up with a digital product around a calculation of the carbon offset, carbon footprint of aspects of their machinery, and they're looking to make that available for others to be able for their customers to be able to use, to get visibility of their carbon footprint from this component as part of their broader space. Now, there are a whole number of places where that initiative, if you like, could be led from. And one question could be: does it align with a particular existing customer industry segment? Well, yes, but probably no. May do. Therefore, it might not naturally fit in the existing commercial sales facing part of the world. Does it align with today's physical products? Probably. Maybe, so that would maybe make a little bit more sense. Or is it actually that the opportunity it delivers going to be used by third-party software technologists and/or the technology teams at customers that might want to be taking up using this product? In which case, perhaps the day-to-day dialogue is going to be more of a technology one, and some of the tech leaders in the organization may be well placed to move that conversation along. So there is always, and it depends, and it's really about who is back to your business model questions. Who is the customer? Back to Matthias's question. What kind of value are we looking to get from this? And who are the people with the best skills, knowledge, expertise, customer innovation approach that are going to be able to take it forward?
Yeah, and I think that Risto had a comment in the chat about the question about the ecosystems, and we addressed that from one part. From, for example, this API, the answer might be that it's the supply chain or some other part of the organization that is actually the responsible for it, and then in the business model canvas, that's kind of a funny thing that we used in the API cycles, that in a normal business model canvas, you would put the end customer into the kind of the customer box there. But in a API business model canvas, you might put an internal customer or another team inside of your organization inside of it, or your partner. And that's what makes, I think, ecosystems and also this kind of API capability look into kind of, it's a little bit different maybe than your traditional thinking of a product and business model. And that's where I think we go to the whole like product versus project versus API product versus product and all that terminology problem. So what do you guys think about that? For example, Claire, I know this is your pet thing.
Yes, I think we probably would need another whole keynote to cover the opportunities for moving from a project to a product mindset. But I might even invite Matthias to comment on what you're seeing with people, really trying to get their heads around this productization thinking. When they become, organizations are used to understanding projects, they get that construct.
Yeah, so I think there is a terminology clash a little bit about productization. You can think about the API as a product in terms of I'm going to sell an API like Twilio or Stripe does it, and therefore, because I sell the API, my API is a product. The business model canvas gives us another way of looking at it. Then the API would be the value proposition for a Twilio or Stripe, where they use direct API monetization. The API is the value proposition. And then you have the other way of looking at API as a product. And this is just saying, hey, let's use API product management or just general product management principles, and in order to create API products, meaning, hey, we need to look at the customers. Who are we building it for? Why are we building it? How do we create useful stuff for those customers? So that's the product management approach. And the product management approach applies to APIs that are even internal. So they don't need to be real products that you sell to against money to a customer. You can use with success product management techniques even for internal, very kind of technical or hidden APIs. So I think making this distinction is super super important. And also about the ecosystem. So you were talking about the ecosystem. One comment on that. In an ecosystem case, it sometimes helps not only to look at the business model of the API provider, but also to look at the business model of the API consumer. Who is actually using this API and what business models does it allow, right? So this means because the API is an interface, it's also the interface between two businesses, and it's also the interface between two business models. And that's when you start playing with a business model canvas, you will always have those two business models in mind. The API provider, probably your business model, and your customer's business model, which is then enabled by it. I don't know, have you seen something like that, Marjukka?
Yeah, I think that like traditionally, when we were thinking of partnerships between companies, there was always that, hey, let's do business together. It's going to be great. And then we bump into, well, actually, our customer segments are totally different and our cultures are different and everything. So in API cases, it's kind of the same thing, that if the business models of the provider and the consumer don't really fit, like let's say other one is servicing different customer segments, or there's differences in the data qualities, or they are going to use the API with devices that you are not expecting to kind of support and so forth. So there might be all kinds of ways that there will be friction. And one way to look at it is that when you are planning as an potential API consumer, or when you are planning your business model, whatever you are selling, then look at the key resources in your business model canvas. Look at okay, whose APIs are going to give me access or be the key resources. And then you will start to get there, but you have to kind of put them overlapping and figure out, does this work? Does this make sense? And we were actually doing some great exercises together to kind of map this out, because we are facing this issue in the customer cases, all of us, all the time. So I think that is a valuable thing. But wrapping up things, so Matthias, I know you had a few key pointers at the end, so let's do that.
Yes, so I just wanted to summarize a little bit what we have learned in this conversation. Now, there are 3 foundations for creating business value with APIs. And this means that you need to think about your business model. And the business model canvas can be a really great tool to help you think about it and brainstorm. You need to have an appropriate pattern for API monetization. It's not always direct. There's indirect. And there are several patterns that you can use to help you construct those indirect opportunities. And then you need to have support from the organization, right? So the organization structure needs to be there to create great API products. And if you now have a day of the conference in front of you, you will hear about those different topics that we've talked about business models, about monetization, about organizational issues. So here's some things to keep an eye out for. When you hear monetization, always think about, hey, is this a direct or indirect type of monetization? In general, when you hear about language and terminology, there's not always a well-defined thing out there yet, because things are still moving. So think about what works for you and look for the definitions of those terms that are being used. API product leadership. right? Who is actually driving your API initiative? Is it IT? Is it business? Is it digital? Always keep thinking about this when you hear some experience reports later on. And what is your approach? Are you going for the big plan, or are you doing a small start and then iterations on top of that?